Big Z Reviews. Hi, my name is Brandon Zarzyczny, but you can call me Big Z, and today I'm talking about the biggest problems with college football, along with how I would fix them if I was in charge. For some background, I live in north central Pennsylvania, and most of my family has lived in the area for hundreds of years. So obviously, I'm a generational Penn State football fan, and that's kind of where my point of view will be coming from in this video. So I love this past season with the new extended playoffs, except of course for the last game and a half, as I'm a Penn State fan, but it was full of problems. Ones that will only get worse if things aren't changed. So I think the biggest and the most existential crises that face college football are the most obvious and of course difficult to fix. And that's the transfer portal and NIL, or name, image, and likeness deals. But I'm going to start with some easier things to fix before diving deeper. So while the extended playoffs were great, there was a clear decreased amount of excitement for the championship game, in spite of it being between two of the best programs in the country, Ohio State and Notre Dame. To me, that was only because the season went way too long. There's no reason for the season to extend so far into the new year. I mean, it should be over in time for the apparent student athletes to start the new semester. I really think that the season needs to end 1 to 2 weeks earlier, and the best way for that to happen, which will also fix some other problems, is to get rid of the conference championship games. Every team that won their conference championship game and got a bye in the playoffs lost their game, showing that there was no benefit in winning their conference, while teams like Penn State and Texas lost in their conference championship games and didn't get a bye, so that if they would have met each other in the national championship, if they had won the semifinals, they would have both played 17 games. And that would have been the most ever played in college football, and the same amount of games that most teams play in the NFL, which just isn't right to me. The other game or week that I consider moving is the Army-Navy game, which I really don't think anyone cares about unless you're in the military. I mean, it happens after an entire season of football, but before the playoffs. So no one really cares about a game that doesn't matter at all at that point. And even if somehow one or both of those teams would be in the playoffs, the bracket would have already been set. I honestly think that everyone would care a lot more about the game if it kicked off the season every year. I truly believe that millions of college football starved fans would tune into the game with rapt attention if it happened a week before the start of the season. And if you like that idea, but you still want to have a rest week for all the teams before the playoffs start, it could be really interesting to have a wild card Saturday game week instead of the Army-Navy and the conference championship weeks. Like for this postseason, you could have definitely made an argument that the two teams that missed the playoffs were better than a lot of teams that went one and done. So if you had the teams ranked from 11 to 14 to play each other for the last two spots in the tournament, there could be a lot of extra excitement. You could have some of those Cinderella story seasons enders, which should be really fun. But now on to the biggest problems with college football. And I truly think that the only way to actually attempt to fix anything is to have a commissioner of college football like Roger Goodell and a players union like the NFLPA. But of course, to have a union, all of the players on the new stupid 105-man roster for every team in the top 5 conferences need to actually be employees of the school. And on that 105-man roster, I see why they're doing it, but it's going to end walk-ons. Like, no one's going to walk on. Instead, you're going to get some more 3-star prospects to fill out that roster spot. And then, like, you're not going to have some of my favorite videos I can watch like about when you have a walk-on that they surprise with a full scholarship. It's such an amazing and heartfelt moment. And it actually happened to my cousin. But she had, like, an issue where she didn't play her junior year in high school because of health issues. So then she went to a junior college in Penn State Wilkes-Barre, and she then went on to main campus. but she was like a manager and on the practice squad. And actually, for her senior season, they surprised her with a walk-on scholarship for the Penn State Nittany Lions, their basketball team. And I mean, it's such an amazing moment. And we're not going to get that anymore. But, oh well. For 100 years, all of the people in charge have been fully committed to the charade that their players are student athletes. And they stuck their heads in the sand whenever they heard an argument about it. Now, what we have is a two-headed Cerberus in the form of NIL contracts and the transfer portal, with a third head being brain dead from all of the concussions. You know, it's just the wild, wild west in college football. And there is so much potential harm for the billion-dollar college football programs and all of the amazingly gifted athletes that don't have a fully developed frontal cortex, unless, of course, they're 7-year seniors. And I mean, there are just so many horror stories out there, with many more that probably haven't been told about the abuse of NIL deals. You know, at its core, it makes sense for these famous young guys to be able to make money doing commercials, advertising, endorsements, selling signatures, memorabilia, and making their own monetized YouTube channel, which previously would have gotten you kicked off the team like a certain YouTube kicker. However, every team has taken advantage of the loopholes with the system to set up NIL funding groups, collecting money from rich boosters to attract or maintain enough talent on the team to be competitive. I mean, there are a lot of incredibly important positions on a football team, and most of them don't create superstars that would get a decent amount of money for real NIL deals. I mean, you're not going to have usually an offensive guard as like doing the commercials for the local car dealership. You know, you want something bigger than that. You know, you want to have Nick Singleton on the big Nike billboard. You know, you want the stars for a lot of the actual big deals. So every team across the country are making promises about how much money they can get the players in these deals, but they can easily fall through, and the contracts seem really difficult to enforce. Like just this past season, UNLV brought in the quarterback Matthew Sluka through the transfer portal with the promise of a $100,000 NIL deal. However, when the money failed to come through, he redshirted himself after starting for the first 3 games of the season to save a year of his eligibility. And I mean, it's kind of crazy to leave your team like that, but you have to understand, if you're promised money and you're not paid, like you're not going to go back to work the next day, the next week. And even in the best cases, most of the NIL marketing agencies that are getting the kids these deals are charging at least 20 to 30% of everything they receive, while the average for professional athlete agencies are 4 to 15% of their playing contract and 10 to 20% of all the endorsement contracts that they get them. Then you have the more shady NIL agencies, where they somehow are essentially giving them a predatory loan as an NIL deal that they'll then have to pay off with interest from their first NFL contract. I know there's one guy that was trying to fight it, saying it wasn't fair. They didn't realize what the actual deal he was signing was. And these schools, they are making hundreds of millions of dollars per school from their football programs, with the evaluation of some of the biggest teams being over $1 billion. It's also been reported that Ohio State, officially the best team of the 2024 season, paid out over $20 million in NIL deals, and that number is only going to go up. So it's clear to me that all of the college football players in the top divisions need to be employees being paid a minimum of around $50,000 a year, with a salary cap for the whole team of around $20 million. And that's for the whole roster, that will avoid any team beating the competition at the top level by having a bigger pocketbook. And this would give every team around $15 million if they're willing to spend it to attract the star players to their programs. And all of these colleges have much more money than that available to them. And in most cases, the players are already getting around $40,000 worth of value from their full scholarship. And another $50K would be nothing for them. I mean, for Penn State, they're doing a $100 million stadium renovation right now, and they're paying their new defensive coordinator around the same that the job gets in the NFL. I've always found it insane that just because they're student athletes, they aren't able to be paid by the college as employees. I mean, I went to a small liberal arts college, and while I was a student, I worked as a TA, a laboratory assistant, and as a research assistant. And for all the time I put in, I was paid relatively well. I mean, I can guarantee that grading lab reports, setting up experiments, and making sure the freshmen didn't set themselves on fire with a Bunsen burner or accidentally spray acid into their eyes is a lot easier and safer than training 5 days a week all year long and playing up to 17 possibly full contact games a year against some of the best athletes in the world. I don't see any reason not to make these collegiate athletes employees and end the farce of most of the NIL deals. There's also going to be a series of benefits for everyone with this change, as when the students actually have a contract with the teams, there would be language within that fixes so many of the other problems. I mean, the transfer portal could be immediately fixed in these contracts, where the only time it would be open would be a 4-week window in May. So there wouldn't be any more Bulas where they're enticed by a $3 million NIL deal to leave Penn State at the start of the playoffs to get the starting QB job at Missouri. If they break this contract, they could lose whatever money they're offered to play for the program. And if other teams are in their DMs, they could be sued for tampering. With the creation of a union for all of these new collegiate athlete employees, they could also be able to fight for long-term health insurance, player safety, and at later times increasing that $20 million salary cap. I mean, that's a fraction of what the salary cap is for the NFL. Along with this union to fight for the interests of collegiate football as a whole, again, I think there should also be a commissioner. And right now, the teams and the divisions are so separated with opposing interests, and there needs to be someone overlooking it all as impartially as possible. If I was commissioner, if I could wave a magic wand and somehow be the commissioner of all college football, along with making all the athletes employees, there has to be more parity between the different divisions. Like right now, the rules are so different between them that if they're going to play each other in the playoffs, they should have the same rules. That means every team should be part of a conference. And I'm looking at you, Notre Dame. I love Notre Dame. They are my second favorite team. Like in my area, probably around the country. If you're Catholic, you're probably a Notre Dame fan. I know that Notre Dame would fight this, as they make so much money on their own. But something could definitely be worked out. Even if it was something like Puerto Rico and Washington, D.C., where they're part of America, but they kind of aren't. Taxation without representation. And so for example, if they kept all of their contract money that they already have set up, and that still went to themselves, but they would still play in one of the divisions, and they maybe even wouldn't receive a cut of the money that the whole division gets that they split amongst each other. And then every team would play 8 to 9 conference games a year. And then I would also really think I'd love to end the bullshit stat padding of the best teams in the league playing small schools in the beginning of the year. Like FYU, for example, since we're still talking about Notre Dame. I mean, if you win, it doesn't mean anything. But if you lose, it's like 2 losses. And you're even paying $2 million to be beat at that point. Because a lot of schools gets money to actually go to their stadium and play against them. I mean, it would be the same as if the Steelers started off the NFL season by playing 2 XFL teams or CFL Canadian football teams. Instead, I'd love for there to be rotating conference play, where each season the conferences would play against a different conference for their 2 or 3 games, 2 to 4 games, however many games you want to set up. So, I mean, can you imagine how many amazing matchups could come from the SEC playing the Big Ten in the regular season for multiple games? And what with ACC, all of them, like, it could be a lot of great games and actual real games that mean something instead of all these teams starting off the season playing nobodies. Look, I'm just a fat idiot talking to a camera in my room in front of a bunch of Funko Pops, movies, and books behind me. So, what the hell do I know? However, everyone can see that college football is broken and something needs to be done to fix it. Football is clearly the most popular sport in America, and for half the year, Sunday is owned by the NFL and Saturday is owned by college football. And I mean, there are many people that prefer college football to the NFL. And it's like, for all other sports, I know this would mess up with some of the other collegiate sports, but you have to create your own category. Because so many other sports, they have the minor leagues. NFL does not have the minor leagues. The minor leagues is college football. I mean, there's spring football, but it's just not the same. And there's a lot of people like prefer college football. And I mean, I can watch every college football game pretty much. I have a YouTube TV. I can watch more college football than I can watch NFL games, which is crazy. And I'm not paying anything extra. So, I mean, people love football. And these athletes, they deserve to be paid for all the people watching them. Like, I mean, the stadiums are insane. Like, you have to go to the biggest, soccer or football, the other football, not American football stadiums to see 100,000 people showing up everyone wearing like a whiteout at Penn State. That just doesn't exist except for like the biggest stadiums in the world. And you have multiple of them for college football. And they're making so much money and they can pay their players. Like for real, not with these NIL deals. And the players can still make real like sponsorship deals on top of the money they're getting from the colleges. Because, I mean, honestly, all of these players, these amazing athletes, they're putting their bodies, their brains, and their lives, in some cases, on the line, and they deserve to be paid. So thanks for watching, and if you want to see anything more from me, you can subscribe down below. Thanks.